Well, I saw this picture this week. If you can't read it, it says, "Stop. Please do not enter our hospital if you're feeling unwell. Thank you for helping keep all our people safe." It sounds mad, doesn't it? If a hospital is not for unwell people, who is it for? I think it was linked to COVID, so I understand what it's saying, but you can understand why people found it amusing. But you know, sometimes sadly we can feel a little bit like this in terms of church. Can feel like we sort of don't want to go until we feel better. Or maybe we're at home and we don't want to pray, or we don't want to come before Jesus until we've sort of sorted ourselves out a little bit. We know that Jesus is pure, and we sort of think, I don't want Jesus to be involved in the sort of the muckiness of my life. He's too pure for that. Or maybe, sadly, we feel that about others. Church isn't really appropriate for them right now. They need to sort of sort themselves out a bit more, tidy themselves up a little bit, and then they'll be more ready for church. You know, a bit like a hospital. Jesus came as the doctor for the sick. He came especially for the spiritually sick. That is why he came. And what we'll see this evening is Jesus deliberately heading to meet someone that one person has described as the most wretched man in the Bible. The most wretched man in the Bible. It's the last place that we might expect Jesus, the Son of God, to go. And yet he goes there and he meets this man. And he does something that no one else can do. And my hope for us this evening, my hope and my prayer, is that we'll be encouraged as we think about what Jesus can do for us in our lives. But also it will give us a boost as we think about sharing Jesus and what he's done for us. That what we look at tonight will give us a boost. And I hope as well that it will give you a bit of a boost as you think about Holiday Bible Club this week. Well, Jesus and his disciples have just survived the terrifying storm on the Sea of Galilee. Well, at least it was terrifying for his disciples. Jesus was asleep, but his disciples were panicking. They thought they were going to drown. But then with a few words, I'm sure many of you know the story, if not all of you, with a few words, he calms the storm. And then in Mark chapter 5, they reached the other side of the Sea of Galilee. I don't know exactly where it is, there's a bit of debate about it, but it's roughly the southeast corner of the Sea of Galilee. And the most important thing about it is that this is Gentile territory. They're not in Jewish territory anymore. And this is the first time that Jesus has visited Gentile territory. And as soon as he steps out the boat, he's met by this man who comes running at him from the tombs. And this is where he's been living. He's not a sort of caretaker that looks after them. No, this is where he's been living. And we see why. He has an impure spirit. Or as the heading in the Bible says, he is demon possessed. Now, yesterday evening, I went for a walk around Crowborough. I quite like to do it when I'm thinking about preaching. And I walked past one house and there was a big a window and it had the word happy written on it in big letters, happy. But surrounding it were images of death and a big gravestone. And I thought happy is not quite the word that I associate with those images. But of course it was celebrating Halloween, that's coming up this Thursday. And I walked past a few places last night, and there were a few different places that all wished me a happy Halloween. And of course, many people now, they see it as a sort of a happy celebration, don't they? It's an opportunity to dress up in silly costumes, to get sweets, or to give away sweets, to meet with neighbours. This is what it said online about why people celebrate Halloween now. It said, in modern celebrations, Halloween has become more of a playful and fun event, focused on costumes, trick-or-treating and spooky decorations. For most people, it is a light-hearted holiday. Its emphasis is more on fantasy and fun, than on any serious connection to evil or harmful practices. I guess in some ways it's a little bit similar to how people celebrate Christmas, because what's happened at Christmas, people have forgotten about Jesus, haven't they? And that's why as sort of preachers we need to bang on about it every year, because people forget. And they've found so many other ways to celebrate it, and we're like, no, it's about Jesus. But in a similar way, it's a bit like that with Halloween, where people have all these fun things, but they don't give much of a thought about actually what it's about. What's its background? And for many people now, they see it as just a bit of fun. But I went into Morrison's yesterday, and they had a whole display of films that they were promoting. And they were just horrendous. Every single one of them was about evil, the occult, or just extreme violence and death. And if you go on streaming services, you get the same, don't you? These films being promoted at this time of year. I went on the App Store on my laptop last night, and it was encouraging me to treat myself to some games. And the game that was most popular, there were different versions of it, but the game that was most popular was called Resident Evil. And it's meant to be fun, isn't it? It's meant to be this enjoyable, treat yourself, have fun. But the thing is as I was seeing all these things and thinking it through, you see, I've been spending some time reading Mark 5 and reading about this man in Mark 5. And I want to stress that I didn't choose this passage because of Halloween last week. I was thinking about this passage already, and then I thought about Halloween after. But I wanted to say a few words about it, just because in this account we see what it's like to be truly demon-possessed. We see what it's really like when Satan has a grip on someone, visibly controlling someone. We see evil for what it is in this story. And you know, evil is hugely, hugely destructive. It is a scary power. And I just want us to see, as we start going through Mark 5, this is a power that destroys. So verses 1 to 5 in Mark 5, this is a power that destroys. Matthew and Luke also tell us about this incident, but Mark gives us the most detail. Listen to this description again. So they went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. For he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones. Matthew tells us that actually there's two men in this encounter, but Mark only focuses on the one who speaks. And he must have been a pretty intimidating character, don't you think? As they step off this boat. The locals had tried to tie him up and then chain him up. He was so dangerous, they had to treat him like some sort of wild animal. But nothing could control him. Every time they chained him up, he just ripped it apart and freed himself. And this man isn't strong because he's been working out. He's not strong because he's sort of working for some strongman competition. That there's a superhuman strength to him. There's a strength that isn't just coming from him. And notice the depths of his misery as well. Did you hear that? He's crying out all the time. He's cutting himself with stones. It's this self-destructive behaviour that would leave him scarred and bloodied as he comes to Jesus. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. He shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God?" As well as superhuman strength, this man's also got superhuman knowledge. He knows who Jesus is, having never met him before. And in fact, his understanding of who Jesus is, through the help of the demons, is actually better than many of the Jews ever had. These demons know that he is God. And they know that he's from a different kingdom to the one that they are from. And so he shouts out, "What do you want with me, What do you want with me, Jesus? But despite their power, despite the power to control this man, they cannot compete with Jesus. And so they fall down before him. And as Jesus commands them to come out of this man, all they can do is beg that Jesus won't destroy them. Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." Now, I'm not sure I think about the Roman Empire every day, like apparently some men do. But I do think about it a fair bit. And I enjoy reading historical fiction around this sort of time when the Romans were such a dominant power in the world. And a Roman legion was about 5,600 soldiers, and they often had about 120 cavalry as well. And it was a formidable force. And here the man says, "My name is Legion, for we are many." And the point's not that there were exactly 5,600 demons, but just this huge number of demons in this man. And they are a formidable force. And the people at the time would have been well aware of the Romans and the way they were being oppressed by the Romans. And in the same way as they're being oppressed by the Romans, so this man is being oppressed by this legion of demons in him. Verse 10, "And he begged Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. A large herd of pigs was feeding on the nearby hillside. The demons begged Jesus, 'Send us among the pigs. Allow us to go into them.'" Now, we don't know exactly why they wanted to go into the pigs. But the key thing here is to notice that they had to ask permission from Jesus. Just like a little primary school kid has to go up to the teacher and say, "Please, can I do something?" So these demons have to come to Jesus and say, "Please, can we do this?" A whole legion of demons has to submit to Jesus. Verse 13, "He gave them permission, and the impure spirits came out and went into the pigs. The herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned." Well, I don't know how you feel about that. In today's day and age, we're a bit more sensitive, aren't we, about how animals are treated. But it's really important that we don't miss the main point here. It's important that we don't get so sort of fixated on that we miss the thrust of this. Because the thrust is that these demons are so powerful that they have just destroyed 2,000 pigs. They've just sent 2,000 pigs out of their mind. And in this incredibly graphic demonstration, these pigs are destroyed. And we see the destructive power of these demons. As one person has written, demons are chaos monsters. Demons are chaos monsters. But this also shows us that Jesus values this one man's life more than 2,000 pigs. This man's life is more valuable to Jesus than 2,000 pigs. Why is that? Because we've been made as humans in the image of God. We bear the image of God. And as well as destroying this man's body, this man's mind, this man's life and relationships, it destroyed his humanity. And so they were destroying the image of God in him. Look at what Jesus does, verses 14 to 15. "Those tending the pigs ran off and reported this in the town and countryside. And the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there, dressed and in his right mind, and they were afraid." You see how Jesus restores his humanity? How he sort of restores the image of God in him. Now he's sitting there calmly, he's dressed properly, and he's in his right mind. And we see this power that transforms. Power that transforms. But here's the thing that strikes me when I read this story. How do people react? As they see this man sitting there, clothed in his right mind, and they're like, wow, Jesus, that's incredible. No, they are afraid. Why? Because they realise that Jesus is even more powerful than all of those demons. And they are terrified of that sort of power. A sort of power that they can't understand, they can't get their heads around. Something similar happens actually in the bit just before this, when the disciples are in the storm in the boat with Jesus. And they are terrified, they are panicking because they think they're going to die. And so they wake Jesus up and they're like, do something. And what does Jesus say to the storm? He says, peace, be still. And the storm calms down. And yet what's interesting is that the disciples are feeling anything but peace. They are now more terrified than they were before. They are now greatly afraid. In fact, it says being filled with great fear. Because they suddenly realise that this man that is in the boat with them has the power to control the weather with his voice. In both instances, Jesus has done something amazing, something good. But it is scary. It is a scary level of power that Jesus is demonstrating in these accounts. And I wonder if we forget that sometimes. So easy, isn't it, to reduce Jesus down to sort of a bit of a special historical figure. Or perhaps in our minds we think of him as sort of just little Jesus, meek and mild. And we forget the power that he is able to wield. Jesus' power scares people more than the things that they thought might kill them. Maybe we need to pray for a bit more of an understanding of Jesus' power. A bit more of a realisation of just how powerful he is. But here's the thing, it is a scary power. We see that clearly in the passage. But I don't want that to be the dominant theme tonight. I don't want us to go away just thinking it's a scary power, because it is more than that. Because his power is also a glorious power. It is a scary power, but it is a glorious power. Glorious means being worthy of fame or admiration. It can also mean having a striking beauty and splendour. I think that's a pretty good way to describe Jesus' power here, don't you? This man, well, we don't even know his name, but this man who had been rescued, he wasn't scared of Jesus, was he? He wasn't scared. He'd been rescued. He'd had his life completely changed. And in fact, as we'll see in a bit, he was desperate to stick around Jesus. He wanted to get in the boat with him on the way back. See, for him, Jesus' power was good news. This was something he celebrated. I think he couldn't have done this, but I think he would have loved reading 1 John 3 verse 8 if it had been written at the time. The reason the Son of God appeared was to destroy the works of the devil. And I reckon he would have shouted, Amen. He couldn't have sung this either, but I reckon he would have loved to sing this if it was around at the time. Jesus, the name high over all, in hell or earth or sky, angels and men before it fall, and devils fear and fly. Don't you think he would have loved singing that? Remember what the angel said when Jesus was born? Don't be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all people. See, here's the thing. Jesus didn't come just to rescue this man. He came to rescue people like you and me too. At Forest Fold, in the mornings we've been going through the book of Ephesians. And at the start of chapter 2, what does it tell us? It tells us that naturally speaking, without God working in us, we are dead in our trespasses and sins. And we are following the prince of the power of the air, as it describes it, the devil. We may not be demon-possessed like this man in the story is, but we are held captive by sin. We do need rescuing by Jesus. And what do we see in Colossians 1 for all those who place their trust in Jesus, for all those who follow him? It says, "For he has rescued us from the dominion of darkness and brought us into the kingdom of the Son he loves, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins." This is the glorious power of Jesus, to rescue us from the kingdom of darkness and to bring us into his kingdom, his glorious kingdom. And this is why it's so important not to stay away from church or to stay away from praying if we feel like we are weighed down by guilt, or if we feel the darkness in our souls, or the weight of guilt, the depths of sin. Because you see, not only does Jesus have the power to free us from all those things, but he loves doing it. He delights in saving and rescuing and forgiving. He loves to heal. And one day, Jesus will deal with the devil forever. And he won't be a problem at all one day. And we look forward to that day. But for now, as Christians, he's not our master, and we praise God for that. But he does still have power. He still has his darts. What do we need to do? Well, we haven't got there yet, but later in Ephesians, what does it tell us to do? To put on the armour of God. There's still danger, we still need to fight, but Jesus is our King. Jesus is our Master. We're in his kingdom. See, when we come to Jesus, we suddenly see his power not as something to be scared of, not as something to be greatly afraid of, but as something to celebrate, something to give us hope, something to love. When I was in primary school, I don't know whether kids still say this, but when I was in primary school, kids often used to say, "My dad's bigger than yours." And everyone was pretty small and pathetic in primary school. Well, no, sorry if you are in primary school. but if you had someone that you were closely related to who was much bigger and stronger than you, maybe a big older brother or a dad or someone like that, then you had a certain level of invincibility that you felt, didn't you? Because they were on your side. You know, when you have Jesus on your side, who can be against us? His power is glorious. Well, there are two reactions in this account. Verses 16 to 18, we see them. Firstly, verse 16, "Those who had seen it told the people what had happened to the demon-possessed man, and told about the pigs as well. Then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave their region." Most people begged Jesus to leave. All they could see was that there was this power that was beyond their understanding, that they just couldn't get their heads around, and that scared them. And they could see the fact that they had lost 2,000 pigs. Despite seeing this man's life completely transformed, that they couldn't see the good in it. They couldn't understand how the power of Jesus could be good for them. And they preferred to live their lives uninterrupted by Jesus. They wanted to get back to how things were. They were happy that way. And Jesus honours their request. He does leave them. Now, sadly, that's what many people choose today. Many people today have heard about who Jesus is. They've heard about what he's done, the amazing miracles he's done. But they would rather he kept out of their lives because it's easier that way. I just want to live life my way, uninterrupted. I don't really want him in my life. And what they miss out on is the fact that Jesus comes to bring freedom. And he tells us he comes to bring life, and life to the full. And that is what sadly many people miss. So that's one reaction. But the man, well, we've thought about it a bit already, he begs to stay with Jesus. "Please, can I come with you?" But interestingly, Jesus doesn't honour his request. What does he say? verses 19 and 20, he says, "Go tell, go tell." Jesus said, "Go home to your own family and friends." It says own people. It's this idea of your own family and friends. "And tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." So the man went away and began to tell it in the Decapolis, that's sort of the area of 10 cities, how much Jesus had done for him. And all the people were amazed. This man had no theology degree. He hadn't been to any Bible studies. He wasn't part of any church. He hadn't sort of come through the ranks of Sunday school or whatever it's called. And yet Jesus sends him to be the first missionary to this huge area. I don't know how you feel when you hear Jesus say this to you, "Go and tell people about me." I know a lot of people feel a sudden sense of dread. "Oh, I can't do that. I'm not very good at speaking. I don't know what to say. What about if they ask difficult questions back?" Let me encourage you with the fact that this man knew less than you. However little you know, this man knew less than you. But Jesus told him to tell the people 2 things. And interestingly, he says, start with your family and friends. But he says, go and tell them. He says, go and tell them what God has done for you. Tell them about my power. Tell them what I can do. And then secondly, how he has had mercy on you. Tell them about my love. Tell them how I've loved you. And maybe some people you look at and you think they're intimidating. I don't want to speak to them. Or maybe you look at people and you think there's no way they'd be interested in Jesus. I just know it. They just would not want to hear about Jesus. But this man who had been demon possessed, this man could not be tamed or controlled by anything people did. There was nothing people could do to help him. And yet, Jesus transformed him in just a few words. In just a few words, Jesus did what many people could not. And you know, if we've got Jesus living in us, and the Bible says we have, he can use just a few words from us to transform people's lives around us. And I think you'd agree that this man probably didn't look like he'd want to hear about Jesus. He was definitely intimidating. You know, not everyone's going to want to be a disciple. We see that with Jesus. People rejected him. If they rejected him, of course they'll reject us. We know that not everyone will want to be a disciple of Jesus. But we can also go, can't we, with a confidence and an expectation that with the power of Jesus, just a few words can transform people's lives, can transform children's lives. I want to pretty much finish with a true story. It's been going on very recently. It's about a lad in Crowborough in his early 20s. Some of you will know him. For many years he was in YPs, which is the sort of youth group I lead and have done and led when he was in there. And he had boundless energy. He was always up to mischief. Most of the time it was mischief. Sometimes it was a little bit more. I think it's partly why I haven't got a load of hair, and what I do have is partly grey. But he had no interest in Jesus at all. And he left the church and he went his own way. And people have been praying for him and others like him in the church for years and years and years and seen nothing. And a little while ago he was with a friend and he was watching a film. I don't know what film it was. But he got to the end of the film and his friend simply said to him 4 words. He said, "That man in the film, that man needs Jesus." That's all he said. And this lad thought for the first time, you know, I think that's what I need. I think that's what I need too. Suddenly he couldn't get enough Bible studies. He couldn't get enough church services. And for the last few months, he's been rushing back from things, desperate to make different church services and get there on time, because he's so keen to hear from bits like Ephesians. And 2 weeks ago, he was baptised at the church just up the road from us. What's exciting is not just that. He just keeps telling everyone what's been going on, but also the fact that he's got brothers and cousins who have wanted nothing to do with church for years. And yet they're now all going along as well. And I think quite amusingly, some of them went to prom praise the other evening. I mean, it's just remarkable. It was just 4 words. That man needs Jesus. And yet Jesus used those simple words to transform him. And we're praying that this guy will be very useful in God's kingdom for years and years to come. So I hope that's an encouragement as you think about serving here, as you think about Holiday Bible Club coming up, that Jesus has glorious power beyond what we can get our heads around. And as you share the gospel, as you maybe talk with parents, it doesn't have to be something super clever. Share what Jesus has done. Share what he's done for you. Share something of his power, and share something of his love. And who knows what God may do in their lives. Well, we'll be praying for you as you serve in this way this week. But I hope that's been an encouragement for you. Well, we're going to sing.